When I packed my bags and left my old town behind, I told myself this move was the start of something new, an opportunity to grow, to focus on work, to build a life that felt like mine. At 25, I was tired of crashing at friends' apartments, tired of temporary arrangements, tired of feeling like I was always on the edge of belonging but never quite there. So when the company offered to relocate me to the city and help me find a place, I said yes without hesitation. The apartment I found wasn't anything luxurious, but it was mine. A modest one-bedroom on the second floor of an older building, with creaky wooden floors and a balcony that overlooked the narrow street below. The walls smelled faintly of paint, the kind of smell that lingers from hasty renovations, but I didn't mind. Standing there with my boxes stacked around me, I felt excited, nervous, but hopeful. I remember the first time I saw him, the landlord. He was waiting in the corridor as I lugged the last box up the stairs. A tall man, broad shoulders filling out a dark shirt, graying hair brushed neatly back, and eyes that I couldn't quite pin down. They were sharp, like he was reading me in ways I didn't want to be read. But there was kindness there too, buried beneath something heavier. Loneliness, maybe, or secrets. "You must be the new tenant," he said, his voice steady and low, the kind of voice that settled in your chest and lingered. "Yes, just moved in today." I adjusted the box in my hands, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He smiled faintly. Not the kind of polite smile strangers give each other, but one that seemed personal. "I'm glad you chose this place. It suits you." That caught me off guard. People don't usually say things like that when you meet them for the first time. I laughed awkwardly, not sure how to respond, and carried my box inside. Later, when I returned to hand him the first month's rent, the interaction turned stranger still. I held out the envelope, my paycheck barely stretched enough to cover it. "Here you go. First month, as agreed." He didn't take it. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe of his apartment, just across the hall from mine, and studied me with that same unsettling intensity. "I don't need your money," he said quietly. I froze. "Excuse me? I don't need your money," he repeated, slower this time, his eyes never leaving mine. "What I need is you." I felt the blood rush to my face. My first thought was that I misheard him. My second was that maybe it was a joke, some strange landlord humor I didn't understand. I forced a laugh, awkward and sharp. "That's funny. But seriously, here's the rent." He didn't move to take the envelope. His expression didn't change. If anything, the corners of his mouth twitched, almost like he wanted to smile but thought better of it. I shifted my weight uncomfortably, my mind racing. Was he flirting? Testing me? Just being weird? Everything about the moment screamed that I should leave, that I should laugh it off and walk back into my apartment and lock the door. And so that's what I did. "Right?" I muttered, placing the envelope on the little table in the hallway instead. "Well, good night then." I shut my door behind me, my heart pounding harder than it should have. For the rest of the night, I paced my new apartment, telling myself I was overthinking. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe he was lonely and trying to be friendly in the wrong way. Maybe it was just a clumsy comment taken out of context. But the way he'd said it, the weight in his voice, the look in his eyes, it didn't feel like a joke. I told myself not to read into it, to ignore it, to carry on with my life. And I tried. I threw myself into work the next morning, buried myself in deadlines, forced myself to treat him like any other landlord. Still, even when I convinced myself I was imagining things, that one line kept echoing in my head. "I don't need your money. I need you." I wanted to believe I could dismiss it, erase it like an awkward comment you forget the next day. But I couldn't. Every time I passed his door, every time I heard his footsteps in the hallway, every time I caught a glimpse of him stepping outside in the evening air, those words replayed, as vivid as the first time he'd said them. And the worst part? A tiny part of me wasn't just unsettled. A tiny part of me was curious. But the way he looked at me that day kept replaying in my head, even when I tried to forget. The first week in my new apartment felt like a breath of relief. After that unsettling encounter, I decided the best thing I could do was avoid him altogether. And it wasn't that hard, really. My work schedule kept me busy. Early mornings, late nights, and most evenings I came home too tired to do more than microwave leftovers and collapse on the couch. The building was quiet. I didn't hear him through the walls, didn't run into him in the stairwell, and for a while it was almost like he didn't exist. I paid my utility bills online, kept to myself, and lived as though my landlord across the hall was just a ghost who happened to have keys. The silence was comforting. The more time passed, the more I told myself I'd overreacted, that his strange words had been some misunderstanding. I don't need your money, I need you. It was too absurd to take literally. Maybe he had meant it in a different way. Maybe he was trying to say he valued good tenants more than money. I replayed it in my head with different tones, different intentions, trying to soften it. But even when I convinced myself of the harmless explanations, a part of me couldn't shake the memory of how seriously he had said it. Days turned into weeks, and I built my own little routine. Wake up, shower, coffee, office. Come home, cook something if I wasn't too exhausted, or order takeout if I was. Watch some mindless TV, scroll through my phone, fall asleep. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. And safety was what I wanted, or so I thought. Because in quiet moments, like brushing my teeth before bed, or lying awake when the city sounds crept in through my window, I'd catch myself wondering about him, about his age, his eyes, his voice, about why a man like that lived alone in an apartment building, waiting in corridors to meet tenants. I hated that I was curious. I told myself it was normal human interest, that I wasn't interested in him, just intrigued. But I knew better. I'd always been someone who liked to toe the line, to test what was on the other side of safe. And his words had drawn a line I kept pretending not to see. Still, I stayed away. By the time rent day came around again, I realized I hadn't spoken to him once since that night. No texts, no emails, no knocks on my door. Honestly, I felt relieved. Maybe he'd forgotten his own words. Maybe it had been a one-off slip. Maybe life could just move forward. I opened my phone and typed a message. Hi, could you please share your bank account details so I can transfer the rent? I waited. It didn't take long for the 3 dots to appear, pulsing like a heartbeat. His reply came only seconds later. I don't have a bank account. You'll have to bring it to me directly. I read the text twice, 3 times, like my eyes were playing tricks. No bank account? In 2025? That was impossible. He had one, of course he did. Everyone did. This wasn't about convenience. It wasn't about money. It was about me. A chill ran through me as I stared at my phone. I thought about ignoring him, about insisting on a transfer, about calling the rental agency and telling them their landlord was playing games. But something stopped me. Something small, buried deep. Suspicion grew in my chest like a knot, twisting tighter. He was deliberately avoiding digital payment. He wanted me to show up. He wanted me in his space on his terms. I should have just walked away, reported him, saved myself the trouble. But part of me wanted to see what would happen if I didn't. The day felt endless. Meetings bled into deadlines, phone calls stacked on each other. And by the time the office lights dimmed, I was drained. My coworkers joked about grabbing drinks, but all I wanted was to go home, collapse into bed, and let my brain shut off. Instead, as I sat in my car in the dim garage, I pulled out my phone and typed the message I'd been dreading all day. I'll come by tonight with the rent. The reply came so quickly I almost dropped the phone. I'll be here. Come whenever you're ready. It felt too immediate, like he'd been waiting, phone in hand, just for me. My stomach turned over. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and drove home, but the message burned in my mind the entire way. By the time I reached the building, night had settled over the neighborhood. Streetlights hummed softly, casting pale orange glows on the cracked pavement. The air carried the faint smell of rain that hadn't fallen, thick and heavy, pressing against my skin. I showered, changed into something casual, jeans and a t-shirt, and told myself it was no big deal. Just hand him the envelope, keep it short, get it over with. But as I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing what I'd say, the words kept twisting in my mouth. Here's the rent, thanks. Good night. Too stiff. Sorry it's late, here you go. too apologetic. "Take it, please. I've had a long day." Too desperate. Nothing sounded right. Nothing matched the weight of his words from before. When I finally stepped into the hallway, envelope in hand, my pulse was hammering in my ears. His door was at the end of the hall, just a few feet away, but it felt like a mile. Each step echoed against the walls, louder than it should have been, like the building itself was listening. The lights in his apartment were already on. His door wasn't shut. It was slightly open, as though he'd been waiting for me to push it the rest of the way. I froze. Who leaves their door open at night? "Come in," his voice called softly, calm but certain, like he knew I was there even before I knocked. My throat tightened. I could have turned around. I could have slipped back into my apartment, locked the door, pretended none of this was happening. But my feet betrayed me. Slowly, I nudged the door open and stepped inside. The place surprised me. I'd expected it to be cluttered, maybe run down, maybe even gloomy. Instead, it was warm, not overly decorated. Just bookshelves lined with old novels, framed photographs of landscapes, and a worn leather couch that looked too comfortable for its own good. A lamp glowed in the corner, soft and golden, casting shadows that made the space feel smaller, more intimate. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, a glass of water in his hand, like he'd been there for hours. When his eyes met mine, a calm smile curved across his face. "You made it," he said. "Yeah," I muttered, clearing my throat. "Long day. Just wanted to drop this off." I held out the envelope, forcing my hand to stay steady. He didn't take it. Instead, he leaned back against the counter, his gaze locked on me in a way that made the air feel heavy. "You look tired. Sit down for a minute." "I'm fine," I said quickly. "Really, I just want to." "Sit," he repeated, not unkind but firm. Against my better judgment, I did. I lowered myself onto the edge of the couch, clutching the envelope like a shield. He walked over, slow, unhurried, and stopped in front of me. I extended the envelope again, hoping he'd finally take it. He shook his head. "I don't need your money." The words landed like a stone dropped into water, ripples spreading outward, unsettling everything inside me. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean you don't need it?" "It's rent. Everyone needs rent." He didn't answer right away. He just studied me, his expression unreadable, eyes flickering over my face like he was memorizing it. The silence pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel the tremor in my hands. The envelope crinkled under my grip. I thought about leaving, standing up, pushing past him, slamming the door behind me. But I didn't. Something in his gaze pinned me there, trapped between the door and the weight of what I couldn't name. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. And then, in that stillness, he said something that changed everything I thought I knew about him. And myself. His words hung in the air like smoke. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to wave away. "I don't need your money," he said again, quieter this time. Then his voice dropped, steady and unflinching. "What I need is you." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. My grip on the envelope tightened until the paper bent beneath my fingers. "You what?" I stammered, half a laugh, half a cough. "That's not funny." His eyes never wavered. "I'm not joking." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier, as though the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. My pulse thundered in my ears. Shock rose first, sharp and defensive. Who says that to a tenant? Who thinks they can say something like that and not sound insane? But beneath the offense, buried under the instinct to stand up and storm out, something else stirred. A pull, a heat, a curiosity that made me hesitate. "You can't mean that," I muttered, forcing my voice to steady. "I do." He stepped closer, not menacing but deliberate. His presence filled the space, and though he was just a man, 45, graying hair, tired eyes, he seemed impossibly certain of himself. "I don't want your rent. Stay one night with me. If you hate it, you never have to come back. I'll never ask again. No rent needed." His bluntness was disarming. No coyness, no euphemisms. Just the offer, laid bare between us. I laughed again, but it was hollow. That's ridiculous. You can't just bargain like that. He shrugged slightly as if to say, why not? It's your choice. I'm not forcing you, but I want you to know exactly what I want. Not your money, not your obedience. You, your company, your body, your love if you'll give it. The word love snagged at me, sharp and unexpected. Love? How could he throw that into the same breath as rent and one night? My chest tightened, my head spinning. I wanted to tell him off, to call him manipulative, to storm out and never look back. But my legs wouldn't move. My anger wasn't clean. It tangled with something messier, intrigue, because part of me wondered what would it feel like, just for a night, to stop struggling, to stop worrying about money, to surrender to something wild and unplanned? I hated myself for even considering it. He must have seen the battle playing across my face, because he said softly, "You're free to go. I won't stop you. But if you stay..." His gaze deepened, steady as stone. "You might find something you didn't know you needed." I stood slowly, my knees unsteady. My mind screamed at me to leave, but my body stayed rooted in place. "You're insane," I whispered. "Maybe," he said with the faintest hint of a smile. "But I'm honest. I want you here tonight, not as a tenant, not as a stranger, as someone who belongs." The word belongs sent a shiver through me. For months, maybe years, I'd been drifting, new towns, new jobs, new faces. Belonging wasn't something I'd let myself think about. And now here he was, offering it with the kind of certainty that terrified me. I turned toward the door, testing the weight of escape. My hand hovered near the knob. Freedom was right there, just one step away. But when I glanced back, he wasn't blocking me. He wasn't pressuring. He just stood there, waiting, letting the silence decide. And I realized that curiosity had already sunk its claws into me. "What happens if I say yes?" I asked, my voice thin. His eyes softened. "Then you stay. We share the night. If you wake up tomorrow and regret it, you walk away. No rent, no obligation. Just truth between us." I exhaled slowly, my heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. I thought about the stack of bills waiting on my counter. I thought about how empty my bed felt every night, how long it had been since anyone touched me like I mattered. I thought about the fire in his eyes that scared me and drew me closer at the same time. Should I leave? Should I stay? The questions looped endlessly. Logic told me to walk away. Curiosity whispered otherwise. And desire, raw, uninvited, slipped in and tipped the scale. Finally, I said, barely above a whisper, "If I stay, there are rules." His brows lifted, but he nodded. "Say them. No games, no tricks, no force, just honesty. If at any point I say stop, it stops." His answer came without hesitation. "Agreed. And this doesn't mean..." I struggled to find the words. "This doesn't mean I belong to you. It's one night." He tilted his head slightly, the corners of his mouth curving. Not mockery, but something close to respect. "One night," he repeated. "That's all I ask." The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Not suffocating, but charged, like the air before a storm. I dropped the envelope onto the coffee table, the money forgotten. My body was trembling, but I didn't move toward the door. I stayed. He stepped closer, slow enough that I could stop him, but I didn't. When his hands touched me, I realized I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The moment his hands touched me, every nerve in my body woke up. It wasn't rushed or careless. He moved with patience, as though every inch of space between us mattered. His palms were warm, grounding, and when his fingers brushed against mine, the envelope of rent money slipped from my hand to the table with a soft thud. Forgotten. I'd expected something cruder. A landlord taking advantage of a tenant. A transaction disguised as intimacy. But the way he looked at me, steady, intent, searching, wasn't that at all. His eyes weren't hungry in the way I'd feared. They were lonely. They were hopeful. I felt my chest tighten as I tried to swallow down the lump in my throat. "This is insane," I whispered. Maybe, he said quietly. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. A small, almost reverent gesture. But tell me to stop and I will. I didn't. Instead, I let him guide me closer, my body trembling as if every defense I'd built for years was cracking. The couch was behind me, and when I sank into it, he followed, keeping just enough distance so that I never felt trapped. The night unfolded slowly, like pages of a book turned one at a time. He wasn't rushed, wasn't desperate. His maturity showed in every movement, in the way he read my hesitation and eased it, in the way he offered steadiness instead of pressure. I'd been with men before, and with women too, and each relationship had been a whirlwind. Sometimes sweet, sometimes reckless, often fleeting. Desire had always burned hot but fast, leaving me with ashes and questions about what I'd really been looking for. But this was different. Every glance, every word, every careful touch carried weight. He didn't treat me like a fleeting distraction. He treated me like I mattered. At one point, I closed my eyes and leaned back, overwhelmed by the storm of sensations. My chest rose and fell rapidly, but beneath the pounding of my heart was something deeper, a quiet I hadn't felt in years, a peace that came from being seen. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. My voice cracked. "You don't have to know," he said. His hand cupped the side of my face, steady and warm. "You just have to be here, with me." Later, when silence settled like a blanket around us, I turned my head and studied him in the dim glow of the lamp. His hair was silvering at the edges, his face lined with age and experience. He wasn't the kind of man I'd imagined myself with, too old, too complicated, too intense. And yet, lying there, I couldn't deny the pull. He caught me staring. "What is it?" I hesitated. "You're not what I expected." His lips curved faintly. "Neither are you." The quiet stretched between us until he broke it with something raw. "I've been alone for a long time, longer than I like to admit. People come and go, tenants, neighbors, coworkers. But nobody stays. Nobody sees me." His voice cracked just slightly, and for the first time, the weight behind his eyes made sense. Loneliness. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a ploy. It was honesty. "I don't want money," he said softly. "I don't want a transaction. I want something real. Even if it's just for tonight, I want it to mean something." The walls I'd built crumbled. The suspicion, the fear, the defensiveness, they melted into something warmer, heavier. My chest ached with recognition, because I knew what it was to crave something real, to chase connection in a world that so often gave me only fragments. I should have left. I should have guarded myself. But desire doesn't always ask permission. I leaned closer, my voice low. "Then stop looking at me like a tenant." "How should I look at you?" he asked. "Like someone you actually want." And he did. What followed wasn't a blur. It was seared into me, every second, every breath. His gentleness surprised me, his passion caught me off guard, and the way he touched me felt less like claiming and more like discovering. I gave in to the pull, my resistance burning away in the fire he lit inside me. There was no pretending, no performance. Just two people colliding in the quiet hours of night, clinging to something they'd both been missing. When morning light slipped through the blinds, I opened my eyes expecting to feel shame, regret, confusion. That's what always came after nights like this. That's what I'd braced for. Instead, I felt an ache, not of guilt but of wanting. My body, my heart, my restless mind all whispered the same truth. By morning, I should have felt regret. Instead, all I wanted was more. Morning light crept through the blinds, warm against my skin, sharp against my nerves. I blinked awake slowly, the weight of the night before pressing down on me like a dream I couldn't quite shake. His arm was draped loosely across me, steady and heavy, as though we'd always lain this way. For a fleeting moment it felt natural, too natural, and then the panic set in. What had I done? I shifted carefully, trying not to wake him, trying not to stir the silence that had settled over the room. My mind was a rush of contradictions. Relief, regret, longing, guilt. It was supposed to be a transaction, a bizarre proposition, a one-night slip. Instead, it had felt real. Too real. I sat up, rubbing my hands over my face, waiting for the regret to settle properly. But it didn't. All I felt was a gnawing unease. Behind me, his voice broke the stillness. Morning. I turned, startled to find him awake, his gaze steady, calm as ever. He stretched slightly, then stood, moving toward the kitchen without hesitation, as though the night hadn't been extraordinary at all, as though this me in his bed, sunlight in his apartment, was an everyday occurrence. You take your coffee black or with sugar? He called out casually. I stared at him, stunned. You're making coffee? And eggs? He added, glancing over his shoulder with the faintest smile. Can't let you leave on an empty stomach. The ease in his tone rattled me. He wasn't scrambling for explanations, wasn't second-guessing, wasn't awkward at all. He acted like this was normal, like we'd slipped into some quiet rhythm overnight. But it wasn't normal. Not for me. I forced a laugh, shaky and thin. You don't have to do that. Really. I want to, he said simply, cracking an egg into a pan. I sat there, silent, watching him move around the kitchen with practiced motions. Something about it made my chest ache. A domesticity I hadn't asked for, hadn't expected, but found myself craving anyway. When he set a plate in front of me, I murmured a quiet thanks and ate quickly, almost mechanically, just to fill the silence. He didn't press, didn't ask for more than I could give. But when I stood to leave, envelope still untouched on the table, I said it out loud, more for myself than for him. This was just a one-time thing. He didn't argue. He only nodded, his eyes unreadable. If that's what you want. I left before the ache in my chest could grow heavier. At work, I couldn't focus. Spreadsheets blurred. Conversations drifted past me. And my coffee went cold on my desk. I replayed the night in fragments. The weight of his hands, the way his voice softened when he admitted his loneliness, the surprising gentleness that had melted my defenses. I told myself over and over it was a mistake, that it had to be, but the word mistake didn't feel right. It felt false, like trying to fit a label on something too complicated, too alive. I stayed late at the office just to avoid the quiet of my apartment. And when I finally went home, I slipped inside quickly, careful not to glance at his door. Days passed that way. I told myself I was fine, that ignoring him was best, that I was stronger than whatever pull he had on me. But the silence didn't bring peace. It only made the memory sharper. One night, sitting alone with my phone in my hand, I caved. My thumb hovered over his name, hesitating, trembling, betraying me. I should have deleted his number. I should have built a wall and walked away. Instead, I pressed call. The line rang once, twice. My chest tightened, my throat dry. And then his voice came through, low and steady, wrapping around me like it had that night. Hello. Just hearing it made my heart stumble. In that instant, I knew. I was already in too deep. The first call turned into a second. The second into a visit. And then more visits followed, each one blurring the line I'd drawn for myself. Sometimes I went to his place with the excuse of rent money, though the envelope stayed untouched on his counter. Other times I knocked on his door just to talk, as if conversation could explain away the gravity pulling me back to him. At first, it was easier to tell myself it was physical, a release, an outlet, but that illusion cracked quickly, because it wasn't just his touch I craved. It was the way he listened, the way he filled the silence without smothering it, the way his voice carried stories that pulled me out of my own restless head. One evening, I stopped by after a long day. I expected nothing more than a quiet drink, maybe some casual banter. But instead, he poured whiskey into 2 glasses and sat across from me, the lamp's glow soft against his lined face. You ever wonder how you ended up where you are? He asked suddenly, his tone thoughtful rather than rhetorical. I laughed faintly. All the time, his gaze lingered on the amber in his glass. I had a wife once, married young when I thought that was the only path. We lasted 15 years before it fell apart. She wanted children, stability, normalcy. I gave her a house and a paycheck, but never the part of me I kept locked away. He paused, exhaling. I've known I wasn't straight my whole life, but back then you didn't admit things like that. Not in my family, not in my circle. I hid it. I played the role. And by the time the marriage ended, I was too tired to start over. Too tired to explain myself to anyone. His honesty startled me. He spoke without shame, but with a quiet weight, as though every word carried years of silence behind it. I didn't know what to say at first. Finally, I admitted, I've been confused for as long as I can remember. I've dated women, I've dated men, but every time I felt like I was betraying some expectation. My family pretends not to notice. My friends joke about it but never ask. And me? Half the time I don't know if I'm brave or if I'm just lost. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes holding mine. You're not lost. You're just still choosing who you want to be. That takes more courage than pretending you've already decided. The words sank deep, deeper than I wanted to admit. Over the weeks, our talks became longer, our silences more comfortable. He told me about books that had changed him, about places he'd traveled, about nights he'd spent alone wondering if anyone would ever understand him. In turn, I told him about my restless moves, my half-finished plans, the way I always seemed to be running from something I couldn't name. Sometimes it felt like he was a mirror held up to me 20 years older. Other times, it felt like he was a map, guiding me through places I hadn't yet been brave enough to step into. The age gap was always there, an invisible third presence in the room. It made me hesitate, made me second-guess what people would say if they knew. But it also fascinated me, the contrast between his calm certainty and my restless searching. One night, as I sat curled on his couch, he told me about the loneliness. After the divorce, I thought maybe someone would come along. But years passed. 10 years. 15. And the longer I went without, the harder it became to imagine someone actually choosing me. Something in my chest cracked. Because sitting there, hearing that, I realized how blind I'd been to the depth of his ache. He wasn't just a landlord making some strange proposition. He was a man who had carried silence for decades, who had learned to live without touch, without companionship, because it was safer than rejection. I reached for his hand, not out of obligation, not out of desire, but out of recognition. I choose you, I whispered. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His hand tightened around mine, and for the first time, I saw his certainty falter. As days melted into nights and nights into mornings, I realized how much I looked forward to being near him. The world outside felt sharper, heavier, but in his apartment, time slowed. It wasn't about rent or rules anymore. It was about stories over dinner, laughter between sips of wine, the quiet weight of his arm draped across me when the world was too much. Somewhere along the way, the fear of judgment began to fade. What others thought mattered less than what I felt when I was with him. And what I felt scared me because it was bigger than desire. It was bigger than curiosity. It was love. I didn't want to say it out loud. Didn't want to name it because once named, it couldn't be undone. But the truth lived in every glance, every late-night phone call, every time I found myself walking down the hall without a reason, just to knock on his door. One night, I lay in his arms, my head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. The lamp cast long shadows on the walls, and the world outside seemed impossibly far away. It should have been peaceful. It should have been enough. But then he whispered something that made my entire body still. Something that would change my life forever. The room was quiet except for the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. I was half asleep in his arms when he leaned close, his voice low, barely more than a whisper. I don't just want you here for the rent, he said. I want you here for life. The words crashed into me, pulling me awake, my heart pounding. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. But when I turned, his eyes were open, steady, filled with a certainty that scared me more than any proposition ever could. For life, I repeated, my throat tight. He nodded, not looking away. Yes, not a night, not a week. I want more than your visits and excuses. I want a partner. I want you. The silence that followed stretched thin, every second cutting deeper. My mind spiraled. Freedom had always been my shield. I moved from city to city, job to job, never letting roots take hold. Love was something fleeting, temporary, a spark that burned out as quickly as it came. The thought of giving that up, of tying myself to someone, to him, terrified me, and society's voice screamed louder. The age gap, the whispers, the judgment in people's eyes if they saw us together. 20 years between us wasn't just numbers. It was a lifetime of difference, and I knew what people would say. What's he doing with someone that young? What's he doing with someone that old? I stared at the ceiling, torn between fear and longing. Say something, he said softly. I don't know if I can, I admitted. My voice cracked, raw and uncertain. What you're asking, it's everything, and I don't even know if I deserve it, or if I can handle what comes with it. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He only tightened his arms around me, grounding me in a way words never could. I'm not asking you to give up who you are, he murmured. I'm asking you to let me be part of it, to share the weight, to stop running. His honesty left no room for escape. I thought about the nights I'd spent alone, scrolling through meaningless feeds, wondering why nothing ever seemed to fill the emptiness. I thought about how easily I told myself I didn't need anyone, how I'd buried my need for belonging under layers of pride. But then I thought about him, his stories, his laughter, the warmth in his voice when he said my name. I thought about how I felt sitting across from him at the kitchen table or lying in the quiet of his arms. And the truth hit me like a tide I couldn't stop. I didn't feel trapped with him. I felt found. I'm scared, I admitted. So am I, he said without hesitation. But maybe that's how we know it's real. The words broke something in me. My defenses fell, my fear softened, and all that remained was the simple, undeniable truth. I wanted him. Not just for a night. Not just for the comfort of rent forgotten or loneliness cured. I wanted him messy, complicated, older, honest. Slowly, I turned in his arms, pressing my forehead against his. Then yes. His voice wavered for the first time. I nodded. Yes, I'll stay. Not for rent. Not for convenience. For you. For us. His eyes closed, and I felt the tension slip from his body, replaced by something gentler, something whole. He kissed me then. Not urgent, not desperate, but with the kind of certainty that carried a promise. The weeks that followed blurred into a new rhythm. I packed up the few things I owned from my apartment down the hall and carried them into his. At first, it felt surreal, seeing my clothes beside his, my toothbrush next to his in the bathroom. But soon it felt like it had always been that way. We embraced the age gap, laughing at the differences between us. His old records against my playlists, his stories of a world I'd only read about, my restless energy against his quiet patience. Instead of dividing us, it stitched us together. Some nights we argued. Some mornings, we stumbled around each other in the kitchen. But even in the mess, there was comfort. Even in the imperfections, there was love. For the first time in my life, I stopped running. Looking back now, it's strange to think how it started. An awkward encounter, a landlord's strange demand, a choice that could have ended in disaster. I went to pay my rent. But instead, I found the one person I'd been searching for all along. Sometimes, love finds us in the most unexpected places. What did you think of their journey? Was it fate or just perfect timing? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you believe love can cross any boundary, even age and circumstance. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more emotional love stories, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next chapter. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love seeing our community from all around the world come together through these stories.